The Crooked Epic, 1 The Inn of Maniacal Madness, 11, Christopher, the Airplane, 11A, 1. The plan to search the land of Hob with a plane had been formulated by Christopher alone. He knew it as a foreign country and saw no other way to gather information about the world which had been described by Teddy. He thought they should avoid the town where Alex and Teddy had been split up in case of anti-aircraft weaponry, but needed some idea of how big of an area they were dealing with. Getting Clarence Hill on his side was crucial for the search party. Most of the American military and law enforcement found the reports unbelievable, as Clark had arrived back home with seemingly delusional beliefs in which what he had saw. There was no concrete evidence that there was a portal to another world beneath the goods property. Christopher also planned on bringing a camera to photograph the area for proof. While waiting for Gerard Hill to drive from North Carolina, Clarence forced himself to plan. Gather an assessment of the transportation issues involved with carrying loads of materials up the wooded hill and through the narrow tunnel, and also took time to review stores in New Hampshire which could distribute the types of products and tools he would need to assemble the airplane. His cousin Gerard and most of Clarence's family were teetotalers, and putting his sobered mind to the task at hand helped clear Clarence Hill's thoughts. Gerard was scheduled to arrive on Friday afternoon. Clarence's cousin had been a Hill family representative in recent airplane experiments along the North Carolina coast, and even after Clarence's Hill's co-production had spread out from the professionally sought name of Gerard, Christopher had stayed a close friend of both Hills, who had set up permanent residence in North Carolina after the war. In Connecticut, Gerard Hill graduated from Yale a decade before war broke out in Europe with a Bachelor of Science in Engineering. He later would become an Aero Squadron captain in the First Air Service after attending flight schools in California on North Island. He had gotten enough credits at Yale to be rushed up the brass ladder and given a lead command as the war raised the demand for American airmen. Before his involuntary conscription, Clarence had not gotten nearly as far with his education. He had been less truanting during his youth. Although he was several years younger and a war hero, their families, that had grown together closely in western North Carolina, welcomed each home with differing outlooks for their prospective futures. The Texan engineer, Thomas Philippe, had been enrolled in Florida when the World War I draft began and was passed over. Clarence met Mr. Philippe in 1920 when he had run a newspaper advertisement in the classified sections throughout both North and South Carolina, seeking to start designing aircraft which were more aerodynamic and faster. Theodore was staying with the Grant family outside Manchester, and Ella's father agreed to pick him up in 3 days. Meanwhile, Christopher made more calls to a friend who had gotten placed with the Federal Radio Commission and began to see if they would be able to carry some radio transmitters with them into Ham. Yet Christopher still felt the need to confirm the location and report the geography of the underground area as had been reported to him by his youngest son. His associate was unable to truly estimate whether the radios would be effective, but gave Christopher some tips about bouncing his radio signal into the tunnel with antenna rays. It would be a straight-through mission, so Christopher and the two pilots would need to be able to bring a lot of equipment in backpacks and probably wheel some pallets in on a cart. Instead of surveying the tunnel's miasmic decay, Christopher sketched a more detailed route for Clarence late Wednesday night. When Thursday's dawn was pink, a blue sky, horizon filled with incoming rain clouds, Christopher and Clarence drove into town to obtain their multiple deliveries. The markets themselves bloomed vibrantly with brightened coloring, pastels, and light shimmering as clouds gathered overhead, and Chris pulled onto the side of the road to park. The pair of amateur spelunkers made their way around the few stores in town, picking up basic food supplies and extra clothing articles. Mr. Good spoke with a warehouse worker about buying loading pallets. He agreed to come back for timber pallets on the return way through town, and they sat in the car and drove over to the train station. The train came rolling down the track as they arrived, and before they were out of their seats, it had slowed to a stop. The pre-constructed pieces of the plane were on board, loaded by Clarence's assistant in North Carolina. Along the road back to the house, Clarence read through the instruction manual to the radio system, flipped through the pages to the end, and turned around to examine the packages they had received. He began to check a pad of paper where he had drawn a list of their tools and baggage. At the house, they began to pull packages out of the back seat areas of the car and heard a car rumbling up the gravel road toward the house.